So recently, Bones just put out a new album again called .zip. Just a month after putting out an EP, I believe it's called Champion. And like I swear, every time I see anything new on Spotify, there's at least something from him out. Like he releases multiple albums a year, and I would say 90% of the time, like they don't miss. They are like solid albums. Now some of them can be like shorter or longer or whatever, they're still good. Like it's still decent quality stuff. It's not like just thrown out there for random, honestly. And so today we're going to be going over the album and seeing how it sounds and how good it is overall. I gotta say, after listening to it, I love this damn thing. It is so good. It seems like every time he puts a new album out, there's like a theme around it pretty much. Like you get like a certain like vibe or just something from it. But at the same time, you can know it's a Bones song. That's how crazy it is. Like, you could put this against something from, just an example of, like, we'll just put it against In Loving Memory. I cannot mistake something from that album with something from .zip. But you can both tell, just by not knowing anything about it, you close your eyes, listen, you can know it's a Bones song just by how it like sounds, how it comes across when it starts playing. Now, if I had to really say something, it's like maybe one, maybe two songs on here I'm not really enjoying as much as the others, but they're still good. And like, I don't want to sound like critiquing like negatively super bad on this, but it's like there's some that's like I can do without, but I'm not mad at they're on there. Now for the mix of this, I would say it's a solid mix for an album. There's a lot of like different aspects of his like music, especially like when you look into different albums and all that. And what I would say is like, if I had to like put a name to it or like any sort of like characteristics, if that makes sense, it's just lo-fi and dark like quality over a majority of it. Like, it's odd, but it's like eerie, creepy, cool. It has a solid beat to it all the time, and that's probably the best thing about it, and the vocals match it 100%. Genesis is the first track off of this, and it honestly sounds more of like analog horror stuff. If you follow any of those games or like series like Walton Files, or if you've seen any of my videos playing any of those creepy like assessment examination games, it's this type of weird, creepy shit in the beginning, and then all of a sudden, it smacks you. You get right into the beat. It is, like, the best part. And what's even cooler about this song, in my opinion at least, it breaks into two parts. Like, you have the first part, and then you hear that same analog horror weird shit. And then he comes back in with more energetic vocals. Like, I don't want to say yelling, screaming, but that's kind of what it is. It's like, it's a lot louder, it's a lot more energetic. The next song, True to the Game, starts with an eerie piano and some like weird drums, and I'm down with it. I'm not gonna say I'm not, I'm down with it. And the mix of the vocals is very solid on this. The breaks in the song feel natural and not really forced, and also while the vocals are more generic, the doubling of the vocals, and that's something I'm very picky about. I don't remember if I brought it up in my Three-Headed Monster vs. Odyssey video, but it feels like that's probably the best place for it, or even in my Ouija Mac Corruptus video. But doubling of the vocals, I feel like that is something that has to be done very cleverly, or else it can just sound tacky and off. Like, you have to know what you're doing with it. You can't just layer the same thing on it. You have to do something to that vocal to make it, like, not really a second entree, if that makes sense. You have to make it like a good side dish to pretty much accent and help the main core of it. So that's what I think it does. It's like, especially in this one, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of altering in the doubled vocal, but it accents the main one so well that it all works out well. It's well-rounded. Shade Room basically sounds, to me, like a swirling vortex, if that makes any sense to anyone else. But with some more light drums in it, and one thing I did notice, this is interesting, the instrumentals or the vocals, to me, don't really deal with a lot of low end. And when I mean that, more of like if you don't know like music terms and all that, low end is what would be like your bass, when you have like the heavy bass in a car, the 808s, all that stuff. It's stuff that makes it basically sound, in my opinion, more full of a song. But this didn't really have a lot of low end. It mainly dealt with mid to high ranges on both vocals and instrumental. Now, that's something I personally take like, does it work, does it not? And with this, it can hold its own. It's not really left with extra that's just like, oh, I wish there was a bass in here, I wish there was like a kick, an 808, I wish there was something in there. And feel like it's a solid enough track to hold the ground. LimeWire is probably one of my favorite tracks on this album, and like the prior track, the vocals deal with a more high end to them. And also, the instrumental seems to just fill in everywhere else, but it is also just a solid, crisp mix to the track. It's such a nice listen, in my opinion. We're gonna get to the first one I'm not a big fan of. Oh well. Benoit is probably my least favorite on this whole album, and it is only because of the drums. And that's gonna sound weird, but let me explain before you shoot me. The track feels very lo-fi intentionally, but the drums are what I would refer to if I had to really choose a word to do it. And I think this is an actual term, but I just thought of it in my head, that's a soon thing. Trash can drums. And what I mean by that is very crunchy, very like, doesn't really feel like the drums are able to fill in the high, mid, and low with the hi-hat, the snare drum, and the kick drum. I feel like, honestly, everything is kind of on this weird, like, meshed middle ground, and it's just clunky, and just reminds me of, like, it sounds bad, it reminds me of, like, garbage. It's just, like, a bunch of crunchy, chunky stuff together. It's weird, and it's, like, something in my ears just goes, eh. It would be less noticeable if they had more of a low quality and weren't as crunchy and sharp. But it's like everything else in it, like the vocals are okay, the rest of the melody and all that's okay. It's just the drums, they are so there, they're so up front, that for me, it takes away from the song. Hit Battered is a solid track, and the bass wraps it all up in a good way. With the eerie synth and piano in the background, it's a nice touch, and it's like, I feel the vocals, while they're mixed nice, take a bit much of the space. And what I mean by that, when you're like talking about music stuff, you have like, obviously you want to have the vocals like up front and all that, but then you have what I would say like your guitars and all that. If you're talking about just rock band, it's like you have the vocals, you have the guitars, melodies, whatever it is, and then behind that you have like your drums, and I would even put bass in here as well, like a bass guitar, electric bass, and also like different effects, like accents. But what's happening is the melody and like the low end, the drums and all that are kind of back here, and the vocals are up here. It feels like they're too much up front, and it can take a few steps back to where the melody would be. Now, 1987 is another one that I love, and it's not for how it really sounds, in a way, and this is going to make sense in a minute, I hope. But I do like how it sounds. But I like it because how the melody starts out, and then the vocals and the drums jump in, and they don't match. Like, it dances around it. And I love that. It's probably the weirdest explanation of it, but listen to the song to know what I'm meaning about when I say you have the melody going in it, and then you have the vocals and the drums kind of dancing around it in a way, but they're always matching. It's like it's doing its own thing, but it's always gonna hit back and forth. It's gonna keep syncing up with it, but it's not gonna match fully. At their own, like, I believe it's like different tempos, but I believe they're both still in maybe the quarter style, or maybe the drums and vocals are in thirds. I'm not 100% sure, but it doesn't feel like it's in the same tempo as the melody. It might be in a different time signature, which, if that is, that's even cooler. But just the way it works out, it itches a part in my brain, and I'm like, I like this. Executive Penthouse Suite starts out with a piano, reminded me of those weird, if you know these, I think they stopped these or banned these, those weird Facebook video clips of movies where it's like, it's muted, but they'll have like the piano, the violin, that weird shit over it, and it's like the person describing the movie badly in text-to-speech. That is the only thing I can think of. If you know it, put down in the comments. But that's what it reminds me of so bad. But the mix of the drums and the vocals are nice, and it's pretty much more singing at this point, and it goes well together. And while it's not a standout track in this whole album, it does not feel out of place or like a filler, which I like. Time Under Tension is a weird track here, and where it pretty much out the gate starts blasting at you, and somehow sounds tough, but with the calmest vocals. And it's like, it's very odd. I don't really have much to say about this, but I feel like it would have made the drop harder if he had like more energetic vocals to match it. But nice track. Peter Steele is another good track on the album, and while it's not another standout one, it's still good. And while it has more low and heavy and vocals that match the bass humming in the back, and another cool thing about it is that the kick drum does not get drowned out by the bass. That is one thing I see in some like rap songs and all that, because that's pretty much where you're gonna have the kick and the bass slash 808 kind of competing with each other, like bullying each other. And unfortunately, sometimes the 808 can win, or I think it's like what they call side chaining or whatever, where it's like as soon as the kick is played in the program, the 808 is activated and kind of just like matches it. I don't like that a lot of the times, because as a drummer, it's like that's another key piece in like how I know the song. It's like you can tell how the measurements are with the drums, in my opinion. But this is one where the kick doesn't drown within the bass, and it punches through, and it holds the track a bit together more. Live from the Book is another one with a unique instrumental to it, and it's like, I don't know how to describe the melody other than rubber bands being plucked. If you listen to it, put it in the comments if you agree with me. And there's a constant sound of what it sounds like at night. It's like the crickets, wilderness, all that. And for me, it kind of takes away from the track, because I'm like, I'm listening to it, and I'm like, wait a minute, did I leave my window open? Or is this the actual music? And I feel like it should have been either lowered in the track, or just not put in there at all. But for artistic taste, it's not too bad. Chain Swing is a nice piano over the track that matches more of the singing vocals a lot, and it feels like an ending to a game or just like a weird action movie. That makes sense? But it's like, that's the vibe I get from it. I will say in this, just for me, the snare does not match the other elements, and comes through as really snappy and choppy, and it's like, ouch, it makes my ears like flinch, if that makes sense. It's like the muscles in ears or whatever, just like eh. But overall, not another bad one. The last track on this album is Silent Night, and it's the longest, which is shocking. And it's another interesting track. I love seeing more of the screaming, singing vocals mixing together, and the melody and the drums seem to match pretty well. Fuck. The last track, Silent Night, it is the longest and more interesting track, with a lot of the more screaming, singing vocals in it. And what's even interesting about this one is that the melody and the drums again seem to match it pretty well. Now, I would say I would flip Chain Swing and Silent Night, and I feel like Chain Swing acts as more of an ending track than Silent Night, in my opinion. Now, my overall thoughts on this album, just looking at it as one big sheet. It's a solid album, I cannot deny that at all. Now I'm going to go into what I call ear appeal, and if you don't know what that is, check out my pretty much first album review. It's like Odyssey versus Obliteration, the three-headed monster versus the twisted shit. You know which one it is, you'll see it. Check that out, that's where I first coined that weird shit. This has a solid listen to it. I will say that for sure. The one thing I love about Bones, how he releases albums, it's a very good, I want to say it's a good marketing strategy. Because the album does never has a chance to get old. I would say, for me, the lifespan of like a new album lasts about, say, 3 months at best, getting rotation, because I don't listen to it by playlist. I listen on Spotify by album, so I'll have like a chunk of albums to listen to. It'll be, like a new album will be up here, and like the last recent one or whatever the hell, like in the top 5. And then every week it'll kind of dwindle. It'll dwindle, and if it's not a super solid one, it'll kind of be out of there within a couple months and all that. And that's okay. It's like, I should not have to listen to one album, and that's weird because I'll listen to, like, say, the new Suicide Boys album when that came out last, the Sing Me a Lullaby one. I listened to that on the way to the Gathering, because that's kind of when, around the time it came out. I had that, and then the Pogues Red Roses for me on right after that, so it's like, I'll listen to anything from every damn year, but it's like just showing you how my music range just bounces. But it's like that album, personally, that dropped out within a month. It was a good album, but it didn't really get the ear appeal for me. It did not like hook me long enough. And that's what Bones really masters, because like even with his EP Champion, that was before this, that was good. That was like a month listen. It was different because it's like in a weird acoustic kind of album. So it's like it didn't stay as long, but it was like, okay, it's like it just started to go out, and then boom, .zip came out. So right there, boom, he's back up in it. I'm guessing in another 2 to 3 months he's gonna drop another EP or an album. And he keeps that rotation, and that is smart, because that keeps people hooked. He makes it so the album does not sound old or forgotten, and is able to make the album sound fresh. I'd give this an ear appeal of, let's say 6 out of 10. That's about a good middle of the road. It's on the good end, and I'm gonna say, yes, it seems low. Don't shoot me. It's like, it's more of a fair scale, but it's like, if it had to be a 10, this has to be something I can play over and over and over and over multiple times a day and still love it. For me, I don't have any full 10s, but I would say the closest 10 album is Ziggy Stardust for me by David Bowie. This, I would give it a 6 out of 10. It's going to be a solid listen. It's going to be the same thing like I feel within Loving Memory. I'm going to come back to it in a year, and it's still going to sound solid to me. And that's just how he releases music. There's nothing against that. I actually applaud it. It's cool. It keeps me hooked. It keeps me wanting more music from the artist. And like right now, about a week after it came out or so, I was supposed to put this out last week, but I got sick. I'm still sick and getting over it, but I'm like, I'm not pushing it another damn week, because I got the Chainsmoker 2 album coming out soon. But pretty much, this has been getting at least 1 play a day. Which, pretty much, from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep, I'm listening to music at least 12 hours a day. So, it's like, in terms of that seems pretty solid. It's like a half-hour album almost. So, a 6, that's pretty good. Now, for the overall rating, like a good score, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Solid track list, some good bangers. It's like, there are tracks on the album that I can do without. It's like, they're not super big, they're not super small, whatever. But overall, it had a solid build to it, and that's what matters to me. But as always, if you liked the video, let me know down below, like, comment, subscribe, share, do what I got. See you next one.